Hi, my name is Kelly Renner, and I'm here today with Chris Rawbacher. We work in the Windows Developer Platform, and we're going to talk today about how you can create beautiful UI using an effects brush in Windows Composition. Effects are designed for UI more than images, and what I mean by that is you want to create interesting applications like this, which draw users into your content. You can create depth and motion, so users are intrigued by what they see. So we have some core principles we keep in mind when we are developing effects. We always want to support chaining of effects, so you can feed one effect as input into another effect. We support all effects as animatable properties, so you can animate your effects. Performance is a high priority for us. We maintain consistent frame rates with no glitches. And we want to make it easy for you to use effects without having to have deep, extensive knowledge of graphics or rendering. Our requirements are driven by both developers and designers, so when you get a design in your hand, you can realize it in code. Some key concepts to understand before we dive into code. You will hear us refer to a visual tree, which is a hierarchical collection of visuals or content. And often we will be using a sprite visual, and that is the visual that draws content to screen. So here you see I have a visual tree structure, and that is realized in UI. This is a close replication of that. I'll also talk a lot about brushes. Brushes paint the visual with contents of a composition effect. So if I have an effect brush, I am painting the visual I've created with an effect brush. For UWP, we use Win2D open source graphics for effects descriptions. So you will need to download a NuGet package from Win2D to access effect descriptions. So really simple effect recipe, some key understandings you have to grok before you dive in, because effects will follow this pattern over and over again. You'll want to create a surface brush. The surface brush is used to hold your source content. So here I am loading a cat image into the surface brush I have created. I describe my effects. Here I am calling that graphics effect from Win2D, in this case a saturation effect, and I'm sucking all the color out of that, setting saturation to 0. I then compile my effect, create that brush, and apply it to the visual in the tree. Now, if I want to chain an effect, here I've taken the saturation effect, I use that as input into the composite effect. I've also applied a transform 2D effect here, so I can create a masking light effect. And then later I can animate that to create animated alpha masks. So adding animation is very simple with effects. We work very closely with our animation team. What I've highlighted here in blue is all the code that I had to change to support animating an effect. I've defined that the saturating effect property of saturation is the animatable effect property. And I've called that I want to do insert a scalar animation. I create the animation. Here I'm doing a keyframe animation, and I start the animation. Now Chris is going to walk us through code end to end on the scenarios I just discussed with the basic effect brushes.
Thank you. Now let's look at some demos. As Kelly was talking about, our scene is comprised of a visual tree with sprite visuals paired off of a root visual and brushes that define how to paint those sprite visuals. So here we create a sprite visual called myVisual, and we're going to create a brush that's just a color brush. We're going to specify the color as red, size 200 by 200, and an offset of 100 by 100. And now when we run this, we will see a solid red square. All right, that's a nice starting point. And you'll see that my visual was added to the root. Our visual tree always has to start with a root, so you have to start somewhere. Now red is exciting, but much better would be bitmap. So we have an image that we already loaded into a rubber duck image object, and we're going to create a surface brush from it. That brush we're going to set on my visual, and when we run this, instead of a red rectangle, now we will see a rubber duck. Awesome. Now, let's make it even more interesting. Kelly was talking about our effects system and how we can chain both effects and brushes. Now we already had a rubber duck brush. Now what we're going to do is create a graphics effect which is defined by Win2D, an invert effect. We're going to invert our duck. We're going to say that it has a source, which we're going to call image, and we use an effect factory, which allows us to create a brush here from that effect. We set the source image to the duck brush that we already created, so this is chaining a brush into an effect, and we set this as our new brush on my visual. And now when we run this, what we see is an inverted duck. Awesome. Now, Kelly also talked about how our animation system is designed to nicely fit in with our effects and brushes. So here, what I'm doing is I'm creating a vector 3 keyframe animation. It starts from the start point that was already specified on the brush, and now we are going to, visual, I'm sorry. And now we're going to add 2 new points. One that is out at 200, 200, and then another one that comes back to the original point. We're going to say 2 seconds. We're going to bind this to the offset of my visual. And now when we run this, now we have an animated inverted duck. And that is EffectBrush and basic chaining. And now Kelly will talk about image lighting.
Okay, so a new effect that we're really excited to introduce for our effect system is image lighting effects. And image lighting effects have 2 core concepts. One is the type of light you're using, and then what kind of reflective properties that light has. In your more recent builds of Windows, you'll find that you can add these new light types as a graphic effect. We have point lights, which behave like a light that gives off equally in all directions. Think of it as like a light bulb. Directional lights, which have a color and direction. These are like the sunlight shining down. And spotlights, which actually behave just like a spotlight or a flashlight you can shine about your scene. Image reflective properties are the diffuse properties, which are more of a soft, non-reflective surfaces. Specular creates shine. And then we also have added support for height maps, where you can create the illusion of texture and depth so light can fall off your images or other content. So Chris will walk us through how you can animate image light and use height maps.
Thank you, Kelly. Here we're going to demo image lighting. We're going to start with our trusty old sprite visual that we have here. I'm going to skip the red visual here and go right ahead to a picture of a moon, which I've already loaded into my scene. This time, I'm going to have a size of 200, 200 with no offset. I set the brush to the moon brush I created. I add it to the root of the visual tree. And then when we display this, we have our picture of the moon. But this demo is supposed to be about image lighting. So let's go ahead and add some image lighting effects. So here, I'm going to create a height map brush from an image that I already have loaded. The height map describes the height per pixel of the moon and can give us some better lighting effects. I'm going to create a blend effect, which is going to multiply the source image of moon along with a point light effect. The point light specifies a single point in space that sends light out in all directions. So using that with a position that I specify here and a color of white, I can from that create an effect factory. Creating the effect factory gives us a chance to specify any parameters that we might want to animate later. I might want to animate light position later, so I specify it here. From this effect factory, we can create an effect brush, which I'm calling light brush. From this, we bind the moon brush. This is chaining the previous brush that we had created, along with the height map brush. We specify that for my visual, and now when we render it, we have the moon with some subtle lighting on it. Now, lighting is great, but we really want something that looks a little bit more dynamic. So I have animation code here that will move the light over to 300, 200, and go back, and it will do that over the course of 4 seconds. And I say, go ahead and start this animation on the light position. And when we run this, we should see a much more dynamic effect. And now you can see the light moving across the moon, and you get a nice spherical-like lighting effect on the moon. That is image lighting. Thank you for watching the demos. You can find this code along with other great example code on GitHub Microsoft Composition. You can watch more builds like this on Channel 9. You can use the API on MSDN. You can find descriptions of it. Please email us with feedback. We would love to hear what our customers are doing with it, what they would like, and follow us on Twitter. Thank you.